Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the Monday, February 3rd slate of college basketball DFS. We've got a nice little 3-game slate here on this Monday. I know ESPN, I don't know if they still do this. I know they used to call it Big Monday, where there would just be like big time after big time matchup on Monday nights on ESPN once you get in January and February. And this is more like medium Monday. We've got one outstanding matchup alongside two supplementary ones that are not bad. Should provide some juicy options for us in DFS. And we're here to break all 3 games down, tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups as well. And also, we're going to try to talk a little bit more about betting and props, because I know that is something that is getting more and more interest from people out there. So if you are somebody who is just looking to bet or you're going to pick player props, you can get some insight from this episode as well. Anyway, as I've said for pretty much the last 2 weeks, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that you can know as soon as all of our episodes drop, because right now we are just doing college basketball and golf content. The golf episode will come out Monday night for the Waste Management Phoenix Open, and then we're going to be doing college basketball content the rest of the week. As I've stated before, I am still in the middle of coaching my high school basketball season, so I will not be able to get on here every single night, but if you're subscribed to the channel, you'll know when I have episodes. I'm pretty much going to record an episode for every night I don't have a game, which is why the Sunday night recording for the Monday night slate is always a good option for me, because we're not playing any games on Sundays. So if you're subscribed, you'll know when all that goes down. And also, if you are not subscribed, we're going to tell you guys where you can get more information from me later on in the episode for all the slates that I do not have an episode for. But anyway, let's go ahead and move past the introduction. We got 3 games to break down. Last Friday, it took me about 32 minutes to break down a 3-game slate. I'm going to try to be a little more efficient than that here in this episode. But to do that, we got to go ahead and get started. So let's get started. All right, game number 1 on this slate is a battle in the ACC between Virginia and Pitt. And I got to be honest, this one probably looked a little bit more appealing to ESPN when they put it on the schedule. Virginia's been a huge, big-time disappointment this season ever since Tony Bennett retired and they hired Ron Sanchez, who used to be the coach at my alma mater, Charlotte. They just haven't been all that great this season. So this matchup is projected to be the most lopsided one on the slate. KenPom has this one finishing 73-60 in favor of the Pitt Panthers. That game total is 133 points, which is last on the slate, with Pitt ranking as the second highest team total on the slate and Virginia as the last. So here's the one thing with Virginia, though. So actually, let me get this out of the way first. So in terms of tempo ratings, Virginia is one of the slowest teams in the nation. That is no surprise from what they've done in the Tony Bennett era and now in the Ron Sanchez era. They rank 362nd in the nation in tempo, but they are not this elite defensive team that they have been in previous years. They rank 127th in the nation in defensive efficiency. That is one of the worst in the ACC. Pitt ranks 200th in tempo, so it's a slight pace up for Virginia, and they rank 76th in defensive efficiency, which is not in the top 5 of the ACC. Now, in terms of statistics, Virginia is a very poor rebounding team, and they do not draw a lot of fouls, but they do give out a lot of assists. So here's what that means. Virginia, because of their relative lack of depth and because of the fact that they really don't get in a whole lot of foul trouble, and the fact that they give out a lot of assists, you can see some kind of inflated fantasy point totals for these guys, even if they're not scoring a lot of points on the team total, because if you're getting a lot of assists and your starters are staying on the floor, then it's a little bit easier to project who is scoring the fantasy points, because more people are going to be scoring it that are on the floor, and you know who's going to be on the floor. It's just a little easier to figure out, right? Pitt is also not a great rebounding team, so this could be like, somebody's got to get the rebounds out here in this game. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about Virginia. So I would expect Elijah Saunders to be out for this game again. He is Virginia's best overall player, in my opinion. He's a transfer from San Diego State. He's been really good for them this season. He's listed as doubtful for this game, so we can assume he's going to be out. He has missed the last 2 games for this team. In the last game that they played, Virginia started Day Ames at the 1, Isaac McNeely at the 2, Tane Murray at the 3, Jacob Kofi at the 4, and Blake Buchanan at the 5. Andrew Rohde actually missed 2 games ago against Miami. He returned last game against Virginia Tech and came off the bench. He did have 28 DraftKings points in that game. Rohde is one of their best offensive players. He can absolutely fill a stat sheet, high assist rate, and will get you some rebounds as well. So he's a name to look out for, 6,100. Whether or not he's starting or sitting, I am willing to have him in my player pool. With the fact that he played 32 minutes in that game, he's very clearly not hampered by any kind of lingering injury. The other 2 guys off the bench that played were Sharma and Robinson, but they played sparingly. TJ Power also gets in every now and then. I really don't think this is the team to play somebody that's out of the rotation. Like Sharma, Robinson, and Power, I have no interest in playing in DraftKings. Now, what I do want to talk about is how the absence of Elijah Saunders has shifted this team's usage and production. Isaac McNeely has really taken over the lead dog role without Elijah Saunders. In the last 2 games, he's put up 39.5 and 33 DraftKings points. He's been over 24% usage in both of those games. That's a really good rate. And $7,400 on DraftKings, if you're getting 33 DraftKings points in return, that's pretty darn solid. He's absolutely going to make my player pool. I think he's a really good option as long as we have Saunders out of the lineup. I'm willing to keep going back to Isaac McNeely. Now, also in those 2 games with the 2 bigs, right? Because Saunders is a big, so it impacts the bigs a little bit more directly. Blake Buchanan had a massive game against Miami, played 33 minutes, put up 32 DraftKings points. Little worse against Virginia Tech, dealt with foul trouble, only played 15 minutes, only put up 10.5 DraftKings points. And then you have Jacob Kofi, who was a little more balanced in those 2 games, played 27 and 25 minutes in the 2 of them, put up 22 and 20 DraftKings points in both of them. So either way, both of these 2 guys, Kofi and Buchanan, are averaging 21 DraftKings points per game in the 2 games that Elijah Saunders has been out. Now, here's why that's really interesting. 21 DraftKings points per game for their salaries of $5,900 and $5,600 aren't really going to cut it. But if they're both doing that, that means that combined they're putting up 44 DraftKings points per game, right? And so what you would want to do, in my opinion, in your DraftKings lineups, if you're interested in attacking this angle, because Pitt is not really good at defending the interior, if you want to attack this angle, play one of Buchanan or Kofi. Don't play both of them, and hope that the one you play has a bigger slice of the pie than the other one, right? So like Buchanan in the first game, put up 32 DraftKings points. Obviously, that's a much bigger slice of the pie than Jacob Kofi, right? Who had 22 in that game. Now, granted, they did both together score more points in that game against Miami than they did against Virginia Tech, but you understand the concept. Like, I want to play one of them, and I want to hope that that one outpaces their production of 21 DraftKings points per game while Saunders is out. And personally, I would lean on Buchanan because he has shown us in his 2 years at Virginia that when he gets the minutes, he can put up the DraftKings points. And so if he does, play a repeat of 33 minutes like he did against Miami, I think it's quite likely he puts up north of 25 DraftKings points. Now, one of the most popular value plays of the slate is going to be Tane Murray. He's put up 35 and 23 DraftKings points in the 2 games that Elijah Saunders has been out. What's interestingly enough is that they moved him into the starting lineup for Rhodey in the game against Miami because Rhodey was out, and Murray was still in the starting lineup against Virginia Tech, still played 29 minutes, even though Rhodey came back and played 32 minutes. So it seems like Murray is now a fixture in this rotation, and his performance in the last 2 games cannot be ignored. 35 and 23 DraftKings points at a salary of $4,600. He is going to be one of the most popular and one of the best value plays here on this slate. Day Ames is kind of the guy that took a little bit of a hit when Rhodey did return. He's played pretty consistently 26 to 28 minutes in the last 6 or so games. But when Rhodey came back, he only had 14 DraftKings points against Virginia Tech. I just don't think he has the same amount of upside as some of the other guys that are in this rotation. All right, next up, let's talk about the Pitt side. So with Pitt, their game against Wake was a huge game, right? A big opportunity for a road win for them in the ACC against a quality opponent, right? And in that game, they buckled down. They only played a 6-man rotation primarily. They really didn't want to go deeper on the bench than that, but they had some guys get in foul trouble in the first half. But all 6 of those guys in that rotation are very playable, right? So their normal starting 4, notice how I word that. They always start Jalan Lowe at the 1, Ish Leggett at the 2, Zach Austin at the 3, and Cam Corrin at the 4. Now, what they do after that has varied greatly in the last 2 weeks. They have an option of playing Damian Dunn as a guard kind of at the 2 spot, and it would kind of shift everybody else down a spot. It would move Cameron Corrin to the 5 and so on. Or they play Guillermo Diaz-Graham at the 5, which would keep everybody in their given position. So generally speaking, against bigger teams, they have been more apt to play Diaz-Graham at the 5. But they didn't do that against Wake Forest. Diaz-Graham against a very big Wake team only played 17 minutes. But again, if they come into this game and say, hey, we need to match size, Virginia's going to play 2 bigs, and they decide to play Diaz-Graham a lot, he has a chance to absolutely smash and kill a DraftKings slate like he did against Clemson when he put up 33 DraftKings points in 34 minutes. So for me, especially with this being the first game, you've got to check this Pitt starting lineup and see if it is Diaz, Graham, or Dunn in the starting lineup. And if it is Diaz, Graham, he's an absolute smash play. If it's Dunn, Dunn is one of the smash plays of the slate. Against Wake Forest, Dunn played 30 minutes, put up 33 DraftKings points. He was really their best offensive player in that game. I watched every minute of that game because Wake is a little bit of a local team, so I know a lot of people who are fans was very intrigued to watch it. Dunn was really their guy. 8 for 13 from the field, 3 for 5 from 3, dealt with a little bit of foul trouble, still played 30 minutes, still put up 33 DraftKings points, over 28% usage in that game. Damian Dunn, if he continues to start for Pitt, is one of the top value plays of the slate, and I don't think it's like even up for debate. He might even argue he's the number one value play on the slate on DraftKings if he is in the starting lineup again. Now, let's talk about guys who start normally and we don't have to check the starting lineup for, right? So Jalan Lowe is probably Pitt's best all-around player. Against Wake Forest, he struggled from the field, but that's not like a big-time shocker. Wake has really good perimeter defenders, especially Hunter Salas, and they really put a lot of their attention on Jalan Lowe. They said, this guy's not going to beat us, and he only put up 22 DraftKings points on 4 for 14 shooting. His usage was still over 24%, which is what we like. That's pretty solid. He is a guy who can fill up the peripherals as well. So in a game where Pitt is projected to score 74 points, I do think that this is a pretty good spot for Jalan Lowe, and honestly, on a slate where the pay-up options are not all that great, I'd probably rank him as the second overall top pay-up option on the slate. Ish Leggett is kind of a similar profile to Lowe, except he's much more of a rebounder, but he's a very ball-dominant guard. His game log is a little bit more consistent. He was also over a 24% usage rate against Wake Forest. He plays pretty much every minute of the game if he can stay out of foul trouble, and he usually does. So I think he's a very consistent high floor type of play. If you're playing cash games in DFS, which I don't, he's an absolutely great option at $8,500 in my opinion. After that, Austin and Corin are just kind of meh. Like, they don't really ever give you huge DraftKings totals because, let's be honest, the ball's going through Leggett and Dunn and Lowe. So you're never going to see one of these guys bust out for like a 25-point scoring game. It's just not going to happen. Austin does give you some upside because he's a really good shot blocker at the wing spot. It's kind of incredible. He had 5 blocks against North Carolina, which led to 30 DraftKings points. But I'm not really into like a guy that's just going to be out there on the floor at a low usage rate in a game total that's the worst of the slate. It's just not really what I'm here for. But it's a 3-game slate. If you want to put him in your player pool, I wouldn't knock you for it. Same deal with Cam Corin. Like, it's the same type of profile. He's going to play a ton of minutes. He doesn't really profile as a high usage player. He's not going to give you huge scoring totals, but he can give you a little bit of upside because of blocks and steals. All right, that's game number 1. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather and move on to game number 2. All right. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you do want more information from me, there are places where you can get it. First off, follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I tweet out all updates for the show on there, as well as if I ever don't have an episode for a slate, I try to get out a Twitter thread where it's just kind of my thoughts on the DFS slate. So if you're interested in that for the slates that I don't do a full video for, that would be the place to go. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. The Fantasy Corner Discord is entirely free to me. Discord should be free if you're just talking to people. But that's a story for another time. It's entirely free. It's a lot of really good, really smart people who are really good at college basketball DFS and willing to talk about college basketball DFS. So if you're just looking to talk lineups, plays, strategies, it's a great place to go. There's also some people there who are really in tune with different stats on the slates and the injury news on the slates. And it's just a great place to get updates and help you kind of update your lineups, because college basketball, if you're not paying attention to injury news, you're probably just throwing money down the drain. Like today, Dylan Adewusu for Seton Hall got declared out about 15 minutes before the game started. Myself and some other people in the Discord were on it. We were swapping to Garway Dual and Layden Blocker. And if you swap to Layden Blocker, then it absolutely made you some money today. So I cannot recommend it enough. If you're looking for people to talk DFS with, looking to get more information, or just looking to sweat it out with a bunch of really good people, Fantasy Corner Discord is the place to go. Now, if you want to know who actually makes my DFS lineups, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I profile my core plays for every single college basketball DFS slate, as well as why they're my core plays. I can't just sit here and promise that you can play those guys and instantly print thousands of dollars. It's not that easy, but I can promise that you can get some well-researched, well-thought-out takes from somebody who knows what they're doing with this and can help you improve your process at college basketball DFS. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to game number 2. This is the juicy one. Iowa State at Kansas State. Or, I'm sorry, not Kansas State. They just lost to Kansas State. Iowa State at Kansas. The little Kansas road trip for the Cyclones because they just played Kansas State. Now, This one, Ken Pom has Kansas as the favorite, 74-71. That is a 145-point game total, which is first on the slate. However, be a little cautious about that. Kansas ranks 95th in the nation in tempo, but 5th in defensive efficiency. Iowa State ranks 77th in the nation in tempo, but 6th in defensive efficiency. These are two really, really good teams, right? I just don't see this game getting up to that 145-point total. If I was looking for a side to bet, I'd bet the under. That's just my lean on it. This is a rematch of a game played earlier this season where Iowa State won at home 74-57. That is 131 points. I just don't really see, with these two teams being as good defensively as they are, I just don't see this getting to 145 points. Sorry. Kansas also is one of the least three-point dependent teams in the country. They do not have great floor spacing. They do not shoot a lot of threes. That's another easy way for a game to go under, is if you're not shooting and making threes. And Iowa State's one of the best two-point defenses in the country. So Kansas is going to be attacking the strength of the Iowa State defense. Like I said, I don't see there being that much points scored in this one. Old Ken Pomeroy thinks 145, and y'all know I love Ken Pom. I love his metrics, but I fail to see this one getting there. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Iowa State. So Iowa State is very top heavy, right? They've been that way all season long. They're going to continue to be that way all season long. In the first meeting, Curtis Jones led all starters in usage, and he had 40 DraftKings points in that first matchup against Kansas. That's not super uncharacteristic of him, but kind of is. So here's what I mean by that. Milan Momcilovic was a 3-and-D wing for Iowa State that is currently injured, and I believe the Kansas game was the first game he missed. So that was the first game where Curtis Jones was in the starting lineup after coming off the bench. In that game, Curtis Jones leads the team in usage. He is a supremely high usage player and put up 40 DraftKings points. Since then, he has played 5 more games, only one of which has been over 35 DraftKings points, but it was 50 DraftKings points against Arizona State. With Curtis Jones, you are going to get a ton of usage. You are going to get a ton of shot attempts. It's just whether or not they go in that's going to determine the tail of the tail for the DraftKings slate, right? Like you look at the Arizona game, he was 1 for 11 from the field and put up 20 DraftKings points. To me, he is a GPP only type of play. There is no real security in playing him, but you know from the previous matchup against Kansas that he's going to take a ton of shots, and we've seen him do it since then. So I think if you're playing GPPs, I think he can be in your player pool, but he's not a guy that I'm looking to really build around. After that, Josh Jefferson. I was thinking of the wide receiver for a second, real Freudian slip there. Josh Jefferson, the St. Mary's transfer. He is Iowa State's starting 4. He was second on the team in DraftKings points. He had a double-double, but only put up 32 DraftKings points against Kansas. I think he's supremely overpriced. In that game, since the Kansas game, he has had games of 56 and 41, but he's also had 3 other games that were 30 DraftKings points or less. So another guy like Curtis Jones that has a supremely high ceiling, but supreme volatility. I'm just not that interested in playing him, honestly. I'm just not. I think the price tag is way too much. I think you're paying for his ceiling, not his floor. And I think against Hunter Dickinson in the Kansas front court, I think it's much more likely that you get his floor than his ceiling. Keshawn Gilbert is another lead dog for this Iowa State offense, but here's the problem with him. The Kansas game, he put up 24.75 DraftKings points. It's not terrible. But Curtis Jones moving into the starting lineup has had a direct hit on Keshawn Gilbert's shot attempts and production. He only has 1 game north of 30 DraftKings points since the injury to Milan Momcilovic and Curtis Jones moving into the starting lineup. It's just hard to advocate for him when he is much more often hitting his floor than his ceiling. So, honestly, from this top 3, for Iowa State, Jefferson, Jones, and Gilbert, they're very top heavy. These guys are going to take a ton of shots. I don't know, man. Like Jones and Jefferson are probably going to be very small parts of my player pool as pivots off of the other top plays on here, just in case they do have an outscore. I think they could provide some massive leverage, and I think there's a chance they could do so, but I don't think it's a likely outcome. So I'm not going to be placing them in a ton of my lineups for that reason. Now, for the other guys, let's talk about Tamin Lipsey. Tamin Lipsey was Iowa State's best player last year. He's starting to show signs of it this year. 29 DraftKings points against Arizona, 27 against Kansas State. Is that going to win you a GPP? No. But if he all of a sudden shows up and is like last year's Tamin Lipsey, who was in the 8K range more often than not, then I think this could be a pretty good spot for him. And in the first game against Kansas, he was not great, 22.5 DraftKings points, but he's another guy that he's probably going to make my player pool, but not be a huge part of it. The bigs for Iowa State are interesting. So Brandon Chatfield started the game against Kansas, played 15 minutes, put up 11 DraftKings points. Hasn't produced that many DraftKings points in a game since. He promptly moved right to the bench after that game. Why? I don't know. I don't know what Otzelberger was doing. Deshaun Jackson, who's normally their starting center, the Charlotte transfer, he played 20 minutes in that Kansas game off the bench, put up 25 DraftKings points. Since then, it's been feast or famine. 8, 9, 9, 10, and 33.5 DraftKings points. He's a guy that's probably going to make my player pool because he has the potential to go for 33.5 DraftKings points, but also Kansas loves to play two bigs. And when you look at Jackson's minutes this season, it usually is higher against teams that like to play two bigs. And so I'm kind of willing to buy the chance that this could be a ceiling game from him at $5,300. I think that's an investment that's worthwhile. All right, now on the Kansas side, they're now fully healthy, right? They're done with all their injuries, at least the ones that are like starters, right? In their last game, they started DeJuan Harris at the 1, Shaquille Moore at the 2, Zeke Mayo at the 3, Flory Badunga at the 4, and Hunter Dickinson at the 5. But Rylan Griffin and KJ Adams played significantly more than Shaquille Moore and Flory Badunga. So honestly, Badunga, he's probably just getting X'd out of my player pool. He was great for the interval where KJ Adams was injured, but now that KJ Adams is back, I just don't have any interest in him, and he's still priced up at $7,700. Probably going to be a full fade for me. Let's talk about DeJuan Harris, though. So believe it or not, DeJuan Harris, this is a guy I rarely play. He was also great in the interval where KJ Adams was hurt. He's also been great in the last 2 games, 36 DraftKings points against Houston, 31 against Baylor. The guy knows how to fill up a stat sheet, y'all. He actually led the team in DraftKings scoring in that game against Iowa State with 25 DraftKings points. That's right. Nobody on Kansas in the first meeting against Iowa State scored more than 25 DraftKings points. And I'm going to be honest, it's going to be really hard for some of these guys to hit value, especially if they're not going to get to 25 DraftKings points. So Harris at a price of $7,000. If he repeats that performance, that wouldn't kill your lineup. And he's been playing well recently. So this is a guy that I normally never play because he hates shooting the basketball. But I think you can make an argument that he should be in your player pool here on this one. Also, we got to talk about Hunter Dickinson. So Hunter Dickinson, 19 DraftKings points against Iowa State. I believe that is his lowest all season. Yes, it is. So, as much as we love the guy, we've been playing him for 5-6 years now. Play at your own risk because he did not play well against Iowa State. $8,900 is a lofty price tag to get to. I think there's better pay up options out there. After that, Zeke Mayo has been pretty consistently the most let me think the right way to word this. He has been the highest usage Kansas player pretty consistently recently. Right? 43 DraftKings points against UCF. Now, the other games have not been as great. 36 against Kansas State wasn't that bad either. 22 against Iowa State last time. That ain't going to cut it. But he took 19 shots in that game. If you're telling me I'm going to be getting 19 shots from Zeke Mayo, I'm kind of here for it, especially considering he plays much better at home than on the road. His last 3 home games, 43, 27, and 36 DraftKings points. I'm probably going to have a little interest in Zeke Mayo here on this one. The other guy I'm going to have interest in is Rylan Griffin. So he is a wing, transferred in from Alabama. Much was made of it, a lot of NIL money. And he hadn't been playing all that well at the start of the season, but the last 3 games, he's been pretty good. 28, 13, and 16 DraftKings points. I think he's a guy that you can plug in your lineup at 4K and have some pretty solid floor, but also give you a little bit of ceiling if he is coming in and shooting well from the 3-point line. I think he's a very solid value play at $4,000. He's also a pretty good wing defender, which you're going to want against Iowa State with the guys like Keshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones. All right, last game of the night is going to be North Texas and UAB. KenPom has this one as 71-69 in favor of North Texas. That is a total of 140 points, which is second on the slate behind the Iowa State-Kansas game. So I can make the compelling argument that this actually ends as the highest game total on the slate, which is crazy because North Texas is in it. North Texas is one of the worst teams in terms of scoring from a DraftKings perspective that you could ever play against. They rank 363rd in the nation in tempo and 34th in defense efficiency. So they play very slow and they play very good defense. That's not a good matchup. But UAB is going to speed things up, and UAB doesn't play a whole lot of defense. UAB is 71st in tempo, 272nd in defensive efficiency, but they're an elite offensive team. So that's probably going to be what pushes this game. So if UAB is able to come out and play from ahead, I think that could significantly help how this game goes for them and could significantly help that total go over. Now, let's talk about the North Texas side. So North Texas, their starters are Jasper Floyd, Atten Wright, Rondell Walker, Grant Newell, and Mule Sissoko. But that doesn't tell the full story. Jonathan Massey and Brendan Lorient and Latrell Josell all play about 50% of the minutes off the bench. That eats into Walker and Newell and Sissoko. The two guys that play nearly the full game are Atten Wright and Jasper Floyd. So let's talk about those two first. So Atten Wright is a guy that is going to play nearly every minute. He is going to probably take double-digit shots. He has in 4 of his last 5, actually 7 of his last 8. But he's just an inefficient scorer. He's not like a super knockdown shooter. He's not like a great finisher at the rim. But against UAB, a poor defensive team that is playing up tempo, I kind of like guys that are going to be out there on the floor more because it just means that they're going to get more opportunities than they normally do. And so if Atten Wright is able to put up 22 DraftKings points in a game that featured 112 points scored against Wichita, then what could he do in a game if he plays the same amount of minutes and shoots more and there's more possessions against this UAB team, right? Like, I just think that there's a chance for a legitimate ceiling performance from him because he's going to be out there on the floor the whole time. I feel the same way about Jasper Floyd, who is their point guard, who is a big-time assist guy, averages about 4 assists per game, almost averages half as many assists per game as he does points. But he's another guy that's going to play nearly the whole game, and if he's going to be out there the whole game against UAB, you're going to have a ton of opportunities to score fantasy points. So I really do like the prospects of playing Atten Wright and Jasper Floyd here in this game for North Texas. Now, after that, with talking about all those other guys that are splitting minutes, right? So let me go ahead and get this out of the way. Like, this is something that the timing of this recording is quite beneficial. So basically, I had been in like a huge slump over the last 2 weeks in college basketball DFS. Not a whole lot of profitable slates at all, just not really cashing a ton of my lineups and not putting in, like, not landing the big fish either. Like, I wasn't winning GPPs and I wasn't cashing at a rate higher than average. So like, I was just having negative slate after negative slate after negative slate. And I kept trying to like look for answers why. And then this Sunday slate happened. And this Sunday slate was one of the best slates I've had in a long time. And I didn't win a GPP, but I am currently at least doubling my money depending on the result of the Nebraska-Oregon game. And without a big time like GPP winning lineup, which is not easy to do when you're 20 maxing GPPs. And the reason why is because I took stands on guys. Like, I really narrowed down my player pool and I got it right. Now, a 3-game slate is different than a 6-game slate, right? But I don't feel the need to try to reach for a lot of these North Texas guys if they're going to be playing 20 to 22 minutes, right? Like, I just don't need to try to reach for them. I can play guys in other games that are going to be playing the full game or playing with significant roles. So, which begs the question, who on this North Texas team has a significant role in the minutes that they play? Well, the answer is Brendan Lorient. He's actually the team leader in usage rate. He's priced up at $5,500 on DraftKings. I think that is a very soft price, if I'm being honest. Last 3 games, 23, 21, and 28. Before that, 47 and 30. So this is a guy who has a big-time upside that he doesn't need to play a ton of minutes to smash his salary. And UAB is a team that, with them getting up and down and playing poor defensively, this is a team that he could absolutely smash against. I think he's a pretty solid value play at $5,500. I also think another interesting one is Mule Sissoko. He is a Dayton transfer. He is a big body down low. UAB is going to play 2 bigs for a majority of the game, if not all the game. And Sissoko is a pretty good rim protector, pretty good defender. So I do think that there's a chance he could play a lot of minutes like he did against FAU, where he played 35 minutes, put up 33 DraftKings points. So I do think that there's an argument for Mule Sissoko as well. But my main guys for North Texas are going to be Wright and Floyd and Lorient. All right, now on the UAB side, they've got, in my opinion, the top overall play on the slate. And I don't think it's even close. Like, not even remotely close. It's Yaxel Lindebord. So UAB's been on the slate a few times. I don't know if we've gotten to talk about them on a full episode yet. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. But Yaxel Lindebord, last year he was a double-double machine. This year, he is still a double-double machine. He is averaging a double-double per game. But now he's also averaging 4 assists per game because they're running their offense through him. He's taking more shots per game than he did last year. And he's also still giving you over a steal and over a block per game. Just elite option. I cannot stress that enough. He's priced up all the way to $11,000. And all 4 of his last 4 games have been 44 DraftKings points or more. That's 4x value. We'll take that, right? We'll absolutely live with that. And 3 of those have been over 54 DraftKings points, which is nearly 5x value. So this is a guy who is priced up at maximum price and is still giving you 4x value consistently and 5x value consistently. Now, the counter argument would be that North Texas is one of the worst matchups possible. I get that. He can still get you 4x on a bad matchup, right? And honestly, just based off of a pure math play, like if we look at the totality of the board, we talked about a lot of the concerns in the first 2 games. Well, there's a lot of guys in the 8 and 7K range who might not get there. And so if we're just thinking mathematically, I think that playing Yendeborg and a guy that's 5K for a total of 16K is much more likely to get you like 65, 70, 75 DraftKings points than playing 2 8K plays that would cost you $7,000 or a high 8K and a low 7K play that would cost you $16,000. Like, I just think mathematically, even at a salary of $1,100 on a slate where total scoring is probably going to be pretty low, where 4x value is going to be a great thing to get, I just think it makes more sense to pay up and play Yaxel and play value plays off of that as opposed to trying to get right some of the 8 and 7K plays. And so one of my stands that I'm going to be making here on this slate is I'm going to be playing a ton of Yaxel Lendeborg just based off of that math. Now, if you've been here long enough, you know that I'm a high school math teacher, so you know that I had to do a little bit of like a math explanation, right? But I thought that was a perfect time for it. Like just thinking about, getting to a certain number of DraftKings points, having Yaxel give you 40 plus is just elite to have on this slate, right? Now, let's talk about the rest of their lineup. So, Christian Coleman is their starting center. Yeah, I said all that about Yaxel. He plays the 4, y'all. Coleman's their starting center. He's been great this season, awful in last 3 games. Hasn't been over 16 DraftKings points in the last 3. Why is that? Bradley Ezewiro, Georgetown transfer, cutting into his minutes. Ezewiro has been over 25 DraftKings points in the last 3, significantly outplayed Christian Coleman. Is that a trend that is going to continue? I don't know. Honestly, it seems kind of random. Like only one of those games, Coleman has dealt with foul trouble. It's not like he was fouling. It's not like he's been hurt. It's not like he's been out. Like I don't know why it happened, but Ezewiro is outplaying Coleman right now. If you want to hop on that train, you can with Ezewiro at 5,100. I think that's a very reasonable price tag. Now for their guards, UAB's got guards on guards on guards, right? Alejandro Vasquez is their highest usage guard. He's also their most volatile guard. Look no further than their last 2 games, 32 DraftKings points against Charlotte, 8 DraftKings points against Tulsa. He is a supremely high usage player, doesn't need a ton of minutes to put up a lot of DraftKings points. And I think that against a team like North Texas that's going to look to slow them down, I'd rather have the guy with the high usage rate than the guy with the high minutes. Maybe I'm crazy for that. Maybe I'm not, but I'd rather have a guy like Vasquez who I know is going to get off a lot of shots. If you're looking for the guys who are going to play all the minutes, there's Ephraim Johnson at $4,700. He's very consistently playing a lot of minutes, very consistently giving you like very productive DraftKings scores. And there's Tony at $4,300, another guy very consistently playing north of 27 minutes, very consistently giving you 4x value on DraftKings. So I think those guys make a lot of sense as value plays as well. But really my player pool for UAB is probably just going to be Yaxel, big time part of it. And then Ezewiro, and then those 3 guys I just mentioned, Vasquez, Johnson, and Tony. Every now and then Jabari McGee will give you a little bit. Every now and then Tyron Moore will give you a little bit, but I really am just comfortable sticking with those 3 guards and those 2 bigs. All right, y'all, that is going to do it here for this episode. Dang, I said I was going to try to go less time and I went more. Maybe it was that math explanation that got me going. But anyway, hopefully we gave you guys plenty of good information to help you build some winning DFS lineups or pick some right player props or bets here on this Monday night slate. If this video helps you in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review the audio. It helps me on a ton when you guys do that. I cannot stress that enough. But anyway, that's going to do it here for this episode, y'all. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for our golf episode for the Waste Management Phoenix Open tomorrow night, as well as all of our college basketball content that's going to be coming to you the rest of the week. But that's all we got for today, y'all. We gave a 30-minute breakdown on 3 games. Hopefully we really got into some good details, some good sound reasoning, good sound mathematics, right? And hopefully we help you guys build some winning lineups for the Monday slate. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you guys on the Monday slate, and I will see you guys next time.